10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 380. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 380 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This week we are going to do our lick of the month, but this one's going to be a little bit different. I actually prepared a bunch of licks for you, so instead of looking at a lick from a famous musician, you're going to get to learn some licks by a non-famous musician, Nick Minella. But I think that these are really important because it's going to illustrate a concept based off of what we've been talking about for a little while now, which is diminished. So we're going to look at 4 beginning diminished lines that are based off of something really simple. But I'll tell you what, even though I've written the lines, they're actually based off of some of the most famous diminished vocabulary that exists by people like John Coltrane and Michael Brecker. So even though you're getting the information from me, it's like I want you to realize that this stuff is actually from some of the most legendary musicians who ever lived, meaning John Coltrane, Michael Brecker, and then a whole host of other musicians, but famously those two. So before we get into the show, just wanted to quickly announce that if you want a PDF for this episode, if you want to actually get these licks, then you can choose to support us on Patreon, which is how we keep this show going. We don't do any advertisements on the show, so we rely on listeners just like you to keep us going. You can find out how to donate a small monthly amount to us and get a whole bunch of jazz education materials in return by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, or simply going to patreon.com and searching for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. And you'll get instant access to everything we've ever done over there as soon as you sign up. So if you want to support us, if you like the show, consider doing that. Quick shout out to some new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 members, Chris, Brandy, and Anrik. And thank you to our new $3 members, Per, Giordano, and thank you to Till for editing your pledge from $3 up to $5. Really appreciate that. And to everybody that's supporting us over there, thank you. So remember, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, or patreon.com, search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Okay, so let's dive in this week to the first time that we're basically not just learning about theory as far as diminished goes, and we're actually seeing it in action. We're actually doing something with it. Okay, so we are going to be using a 5-to-1 progression in the key of concert F. So that's going to be C7 to F major 7. A very simple progression. We're not even dealing with the 2 chord, anything like that, just 5-to-1 and nothing else. Okay, so through our theory studies over the past bunch of episodes, we know that over a C7 chord, we can actually play a C diminished arpeggio. So if we have this, we can play this. And we get all those beautiful tensions. And that is the concept that we're going to be working off of this week. So if you pull out your PDF, you'll notice I'm basically just outlining that in the first line, in the first couple of measures. So underneath this, we have a C7 chord. We're just going to outline the C diminished 7 arpeggio. And then we're going to resolve that by playing the root of the 1 chord, which is F. So check that out again. Okay, makes sense? All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to base the 4 lines that I've prepared for you off of that. And I want you to follow me really closely because the methodology that I'm using is actually very simple. But if you don't sort of listen to my explanation of it, it's very easy to get very confused with this stuff. Okay, so let's look at the second line. And what I have is I have the diminished chord, the four notes from that diminished chord over C7, that consists of C, E flat, F sharp, and A, I'll always have those four notes highlighted in red. And the reasoning for this is that I'm basing every note that I use in addition to those notes off of those notes. I'm thinking about a relationship to the notes in that diminished chord as I build these lines. And my hope is that I can explain them clearly to you as we go through this. Okay, so let's look at line 2. Now, what you're going to notice is that on every beat, on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, I have a member of that original diminished chord. So if you were to look at beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, I've got concert E flat, concert F sharp, concert A, and concert C. It's still those exact same four notes. Okay, so the relationship that I am thinking of is I'm going to go a whole step down from each one of those notes. So I'm playing E flat on beat 1. I'm going to go a whole step down from that on the and of 1, which is a D flat. Now on beat 2, I'm thinking about F sharp. I'm going to go a whole step down from that, which is going to be E. Then I am going up to A. I'm going to go a whole step down. And then finally C, a whole step down from that. And then lo and behold, I am right next to a beautiful resolution note, which is the third of the 1 chord. So all I did was I took the members of that C diminished chord and I thought I'm going to play each one of them, but I'm going to go a whole step down. Again, it sounds like this. And this should sound very familiar to you because this is the type of thing that Coltrane and Brecker and a whole bunch of other musicians do all the time on your favorite recordings, okay? Now, there are some other things at play here. Like, do you notice that all the notes on the offbeat make the other diminished chord? The C sharp diminished chord? But that's neither here nor there. All I want you to think about is coming up with a relationship from the notes in that diminished chord, the C diminished chord, and then applying that relationship to all the notes in the diminished chord. So let's keep going. So if you look at the next line, you'll notice again on all 4 beats, I have members of the diminished chord. And this time it's just in root position. So can you guess the relationship? All I'm doing is I'm going up a half step from each one of those notes, and I get this. Now, what ended up happening when I did that? Well, I just ended up playing the half whole diminished scale. But the important part is here, I arrived at that scale by thinking in a different way. I didn't just think I'm going to play the scale. I started thinking in these relationships. And again, what happened? On the beat, I was playing this diminished chord. And then off the beat, I ended up playing this diminished chord. But the important part is I was just thinking about relationships to the original diminished chord, just happened to come out in a scale. All right, let's do another one. So in the next example, you could see again on the beat, I've got the diminished chord. But now you notice, can you see the interval that I am thinking of? It's a major third that I'm thinking of. So I'm going to go up a major third from each one of those members of the diminished chord. So check out what it sounds like. Isn't that nice? That's one of my favorite ones. Now, again, I will point your attention to the fact that I'm just playing the other diminished chord on the offbeats. But basically what this is doing is it's just giving me a bunch of interesting ways to play those other diminished chords. All right, now the fourth line is a lot more complicated. You'll notice that it's all triplets, okay? And here is my mode of thinking. So you'll notice that the middle note of each triplet ends up being that diminished chord. But they're all out of order. So now we're starting to get into some interesting stuff that's happening here. And now I have two other notes that are in relation to those notes of the C diminished chord. So here's what I was thinking. I was thinking about a triadic relationship between all of them. So the first note is A. So I thought to myself, okay, well, I can play an A major triad. And what I ended up doing was putting that in first inversion. So I'm playing an A major triad, but I'm starting on the third, which is C sharp. So 3, 1, 5 of that A major triad. Okay. Then all I did was I moved it around and I played a major triad based off of each member of that original diminished chord. So the next one I did, you can see, is F sharp major. Okay. And I did it in the same inversion. And then the next one was a C major triad. And then finally, we get our E flat major triad. And then I resolve that to the 1 chord. So I really like this one. It's a really nice sound. Now that one's obviously a little bit more advanced, right? Because I was thinking about like a full triad and not just a one note relationship, but it still works, doesn't it? And I was just thinking about taking each one of those members of the chord and building something off of it, which I think is a really great way to think about this. So basically, you could think about it like this: it's moving things in sequential fashion based off of those members of the diminished chord. And there's so many things that we could do. Like you could do the same thing, but you could do it based off of the diminished chord a half step up. And you'll get a little bit different results. You'll get different resolution points. You'll get different notes that are on the beat as opposed to off the beat. The possibilities are really endless here, but just start by doing that. Think about the diminished chord and build a relationship off of that diminished chord, and then experiment until you come up with something that you really like the sound of. Okay. So let me know if you have any questions. I hope this illustrates some of the beauty of this diminished chord. And what I'm going to do at the end here is I'm just simply going to play all of those examples in a row on the saxophone so that you could hear what they sound like in time and in context. All right. Okay, hope everybody's doing well out there. Remember, you can grab this PDF and see all the highlighted notes and go back and review it over and over again by choosing to support us. So you can go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon links, or you can go to patreon.com and search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Really appreciate all of you for keeping this podcast going for, as long as it has been. And we'll see you next week with our Tune of the Month episode. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye.